I'm so incredibly nervous about making this video. I've debated making this video for nearly a year now. But the subject, so many women are put to shame for it. I've been afraid to make this video. But I feel like with abortion being shadow banned in so many southern states, and me being from the South, this is a video that needs to be made. I need to tell my story. Because turning over Roe versus Wade is a death sentence to someone like me. I don't really know where to start, so I guess I'll start from the beginning. When I was pregnant with my now 5-year-old son, Caleb, I had signed papers to be able to get my tubes tied. And it turns out that there's a law, a very stupid law, because, you know, women are too stupid to make decisions about their own bodies for themselves. So the government has made a law that when you sign papers to get your tubes tied, you have to wait 30 days in order to get them tied. Well, I care for 6 kids. I've birthed 3 kids via C-section. I was ready to get my tubes tied. This was something I had thought about for a long time. I didn't need 30 days to think. No woman does. If a woman signs those papers, she don't need to think about it. She's already considered it. The law is really an insult to women's intelligence. Anyhow, the day I signed these papers, I can't remember what the test is called, but I went in for this test where they make you drink this orange liquid, and you have to sit there for hours without eating, and they test you. And I think it's a glucose test. Well, I left the hospital, and within 30 minutes of leaving the hospital, I was at a friend's house and who lived down the street from the hospital, and I'd gotten up to go get my kids from the bus stop and walked outside when my friend runs out screaming that I had just left a blood trail from her bedroom all the way out the door. I look down and my feet are bright red and there's just blood everywhere. My uterus had ruptured. The placenta had torn away from the uterine wall, causing a big gaping hole in my uterus. And unbeknownst to me, my baby was fighting for his life to not drown to death on my blood. I went to the hospital. I had a very horrible experience. They made me lay there until the next day, bleeding to death, until my doctor's office opened in order to give me an ultrasound. And when they did the ultrasound, they realized what had happened and put me into emergency surgery. My son was born. They saved his life, and he was in the hospital for 3 months, fighting for his life. I was in the hospital for 7 days, which if you haven't had a baby, you're normally in the hospital for 2 to 3 days. But I almost bled to death. So I was in the hospital for 7 days. And while my baby was at a different hospital in NICU, it was the absolute worst experience of my life. And before they took me back to do the C-section, they informed me that they knew I had signed the papers the day before to get my tubes tied, but that due to a law, I couldn't get my tubes tied. And I begged them. I begged them and pleaded with them to tie my tubes, but if the doctor did that, they would lose their medical license. So I didn't have my tubes tied. And after it was all said and done, before I left the hospital, I was told that my uterus with having 3 scars from 3 separate C-sections, along with a gaping hole in it. Well, of course they sewed it up, but a scar, the scar it would leave from my uterus rupturing. If I ever get pregnant again, as my uterus expanded, it would rupture again, and more than likely, my child and I would not make it. We would more than likely die. And it would be suggested that if I ever get pregnant again, I should abort. Because my uterus is in too much of a weakened state to go back in and tie my tubes. So I missed my chance to have my tubes tied due to a law. So yeah, some time goes by, and 4 years, about 4 years go by, and then sometime last year, around August of last year, I figured out I was pregnant. And I was terrified because I knew I was a ticking time bomb. My kids found out I was pregnant. They were terrified because they had heard me talk about what would happen if I ever got pregnant again. And before I get the nasty comments about how I just need to close my legs and stuff like that, I'm a married woman. And I was using everything possible to try not to get pregnant because I know the consequences. We use condoms. I have birth control. Those little sperm cups, we were using it all. Birth control fails. It's not always accurate. Shit happens. I never thought I would have to abort a baby. I never thought I would have to abort a baby. I was terrified. I immediately started making appointments. It was confirmed I needed to abort. I was too afraid to go to Planned Parenthood because of everything I'd heard about protesters. As funny as it is, that was one of the things that sort of scared me the most, was showing up down there and seeing protesters and being made to feel like a murderer when I had no choice. I had 6 kids at home that depended on me, and they have to come first in all things. The ones that are already here, they have to come first. 2 of those kids are adopted, and their mother died about 5 months after my youngest son was born. After all that happened to me, she died. I can't put them through that again. That's why I have to be so careful. So yeah, reversing abortion laws, banning them, is a death sentence to someone like me. Now, I'm gonna go through what my abortion was like, mostly for anybody out there who may be considering an abortion and is too afraid to go and don't know what to expect. It was a very different experience than I had always heard. Well, like I said, I didn't go to Planned Parenthood because I was afraid of the protesters. I was really afraid that I might react to the protesters. Because I just wasn't feeling it, you know. I was pissed off. I didn't want to have an abortion. I was just trying to save my own life. So I went to a different woman's clinic that provides abortions, and they were so caring and so kind. I went in for the first appointment because they do it in 2 appointments. I went in for the first appointment, and they do this whole consultation, figure out how you're going to pay, let you know how much it's going to cost. And my husband was able to come back with me for them to figure out how much it was going to cost. But then they make you go back into the back by yourself. And the reason for that is to make sure no one is forcing you into an abortion. And this is something that you get asked over and over and over again. I got sent back to this other little waiting room, and I waited there for what felt like forever. And then I got taken into a counseling room where I actually met with the doctor that would be doing the procedure. And she gave me a whole counseling session and told me, if I needed further counseling, they were there for me. And she was just so kind and so sweet that she made me feel a bit stronger and a bit better about it all. And honestly, when I left her office, I turned around, I gave that woman a hug, and I thanked her. I told her she was saving my life, that this pregnancy would kill me. And I seen tears come into her eyes, and she told me, she was like, thank you for that. I never hear that. No one ever says that to me. And she thanked me for it. And she told me that she would make sure I got the absolute best care, and thank me for letting her know that, because that means they need to be extra careful with me because I have previous medical conditions. Well, then after that, I went back into the waiting room just for a little while, and then they took me into another room with all these other women that were also there to have abortions. Some of them started talking about where they were from and why they're having abortions. It wasn't anything they're making us do. It's just what some of the people just started talking. And they gave us paperwork. And a little while later, the doctor comes in and says, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to explain this to all of you at once so I don't have to do it individually to save time. And we're all like, yeah, that's fine. Well, she stands up there and she starts explaining all these laws. I can't remember now. All these laws and rules and reasons why we should or shouldn't get it. And every time she tried to explain a reason why we shouldn't get it, she would start that sentence off with, now this part I am mandated to tell you because of a law. And then she would tell us something, usually partially religious, that to why we shouldn't have an abortion or the risk of an abortion or something like that. And there was some of the risks of abortion she would tell us that she has to tell us by law, but medically it's not true. Yeah. Well, we all sat, listened, we filled out the paperwork, we turned it in, and then we all got sent back to the waiting room again. And they took us in one by one and gave us ultrasounds, checked to make sure we were actually pregnant, looked for the heartbeat. At first they thought they may not be able to do the abortion on me because they couldn't find a heartbeat. And they have to find a heartbeat to do an abortion. That's why these laws are shadow bans. Because without a heartbeat they can't do an abortion. Well, they after a minute or two, they finally found the heartbeat, and it just took them. It took them a while because it was so little, and that part really got to me because I didn't really want to have an abortion. I had to. Well, I went back to the waiting room, and then they put me into another room with a TV, and at this point, they said they were going to have me watch a video of what to expect for my abortion and self-care for after my abortion. And that if I wanted, my husband could come back there and watch the video with me. So I opted for him to come back there, and he came back there, and we watched this hour-long video that was obviously made by the clinic about, how my abortion procedure would go and the self-care afterwards, and how I would be coming back for another visit to make sure it all worked out okay within 6 weeks. Or 3 weeks. I can't remember. It's 3 to 6 weeks. Something like that. Um, well, after all that, we left and everything, and I had to wait about a week for my actual appointment for the abortion. Well, when I went in, I was really super nervous. Luckily, it was early morning. Again, there were no protesters, and there was hardly anyone there. I was actually the first person scheduled. Me and my husband went back into the same room where they figure out payment, and we paid about $500 for the abortion out of pocket. So, to those saying that the government's paying for those abortions, no, they're not. It was about $500 out of pocket. The price changes with how far along you are. The further along you are, the more it costs. Well, after that, they sent my husband back out into the lobby, and they took me to this other little waiting area that had these big, nice chairs in them, and gave me a blanket and had me kind of just lay there and wait for the doctor to arrive, because I was there before the doctor was. And slowly other women came into this room and were in other similar chairs to mine, and we were even given like heating pads and stuff if we wanted, water and such. And when the doctor got there, I was the first one to go back for my abortion, which was kind of scary. That little room though was comforting, because we got to talking to each other and kind of got to be able to comfort each other for what we were going through. And I mean, some of the women in the room were from other states that they couldn't get an abortion in, I guess. I mean, I'm guessing that's why they came in, but I know there was one woman there that I was talking to that was from a whole other state. Well, the doctor comes in and she calls me back for my abortion, and she had me lay on a table that's just like one of those tables you lay on when you do a pap smear. And there was also a student doctor in there with her. She had asked my permission for him to come in there, and I said that would be fine. And there was a code filling down there from, I think, gel or something that she rubbed down there. And then this suction noise, this really loud suction noise. And I just remember crying because, you know, I didn't want to have the abortion, and this was really upsetting. It was more so because of that than the pain. As far as pain goes, it wasn't nearly as painful as childbirth. I was in bed for about a week, and my children and my husband all took care of me because I couldn't really get out of bed for about a week. And I bled for about 6 weeks, and I went back for my follow-up appointment and made sure everything was okay, and got prescribed a different kind of birth control, because it turned out the birth control I was on, I should have been on an entirely different birth control for my age and medical condition and such, which is probably why I got pregnant. So yeah, that's pretty much the story of my abortion. Oh, one more thing. In the waiting room that I kept having to wait forever in, there was this book that women were welcome to write their stories down in, to why they were there and why they had to have an abortion. And we could read the book too, and I read some of it, and I don't know, that just really touched me. I think it was really cool that they did that. I did suffer with depression and a bit of postpartum for a long time over it. I've never been comfortable talking about it until here recently, till the last month or two. Last couple of months, first time I've really come out and told anybody. Really, there was only like a handful of people that knew that I had gone through this. I even kept making videos for you guys so no one would notice anything was wrong. I made sure before I went in for my abortion that I had about 2 months worth of videos pre-made so that no one would notice, because I didn't want anyone to know, because I didn't want to be seen as a murderer, and I didn't want to be shamed for it, you know? Because even though, you know, I'm pro-choice, it's not easy to be called a murderer. And I know putting this out, I'm probably going to get that. I'm probably going to lose a lot of subscribers. I'm probably going to be called a murderer in my comments, and I don't know if I'll argue it. I don't know if I'll leave the comments. I don't know if I'll delete them. It's really going to depend on how it affects my mental health. But I feel like my story needs to be told. And I hope that this video inspires more women that's gone through abortions of all kinds to come out and tell their story. So I know the sort of abortion that I got, the suction, it's not the only kind. You can also take pills to have an abortion, and it'll come out more like a miscarriage. But I chose not to do that because of my medical history. I wanted a doctor there. I wanted to be sure it was done. So I did it. I opted to do it the suction way. I'm not sure the medical term for it, but I chose that way. Yeah. I hope this video was helpful to someone out there. I hope a lot of you that's been following me for a while understand why I had to make this decision. If not, and you unsubscribe, I understand. It's not what you believe. But I can only live by my own beliefs. I can't live by yours. Just like you can only live by your beliefs, not by mine. Which is why laws should not be made due to people's beliefs, but because it's for the betterment of society and because it embodies freedom and rights to one's body. If you're a lawmaker, please think about me and women like me before you try to turn over Roe versus Wade. Thank you.
Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn.